Alright everyone, how you all doing? Today I'm going to take a look at the Marvel Legends Vintage Spider-Man wave. Well, Spider-Man. Let's get to it, shall we? I picked this figure up from comicsandcocktails.co.uk. I recommend you check them out, they're a pretty good store. This figure is what you could call the flagship figure of the Spider-Man Vintage wave. And before I go into reviewing it, I just want to take a look at why I like Spider-Man and why I decided to get this figure. Now, the comic book purist in me would like to go on about the classic Steve Ditko and John Romita Sr. artwork back in the 60s, 70s and the 80s, but I mean, I love those things, but I grew up in the 90s, so my first introduction really was the old 90s cartoon TV show, which was actually pretty good. And like every other child who grew up at that time who liked Spider-Man, I bought a small fortune's worth, well, my parents bought a small fortune's worth of Spider-Man figures for me. So, what happens when someone over Hasbro decides to take the classic Spider-Man appearance, add in the packaging and sort of flair of the classic 90s toy line, and mix all together into a nice modern Marvel Legends package? We get a sizable hole in my bank account. Seriously, I bought the whole wave, including some other figures that are coming out later in the year. I'm gonna die poor. Oh well, I got toys, don't care. Spidey here is kind of a new hybrid figure. He takes a lot of the classic Marvel Legends articulation pattern, but adds in parts from Hasbro's Power Rangers Lightning Collection. Gone is the usual waist articulation, the ugly looking waist swivel, and that's replaced with a great upper diaphragm sort of lower chest joint that the Lightning Collection figures have. It looks more natural and, I don't know, just adds better lines to the figure. And speaking of lines, this figure is 100% smooth. He's a smooth boy. All the detail is painted on, which I'll get to later why that's a good and a bad thing. A little thing I don't think I've seen in a Marvel Legends figure before, but I've seen quite a lot in Japanese import figures like SH Figure Arts, is the hips actually slide down slightly, which you may not think does much, but allows you to get the legs even higher in poses. Which is a good thing. Limited hip articulation was kind of the big bugbear of the previous must-have Spider-Man figure, the Pizza Spidey figure, which got released so many times. Oh Jesus, so many repaints. Spidey comes packaged with two sets of interchangeable hands, the first of which are the classic web spinning hands, which fit in and out of their little forearm sections quite well. They look good on him. And he comes with a pair of clenched punching hands, which, yet again, they fit really well in his forearms, they look good, can't complain. Though, interestingly, in the old 90s Spider-Man TV show, he wasn't allowed to throw a punch, so it's kind of ironic that his figure comes with punching hands but doesn't come with wall-crawling hands. But, I hear you cry, you've shown him with wall-crawling hands. Yes, that's true, but they didn't come with the figure. They're actually from the Ultimate Spider-Man Vulture 2-pack, which I picked up solely because I'd heard they'd fit, and they actually do fit quite well. They're maybe a tiny bit small, but you don't really notice it. The figure also comes with two different heads. There's not much difference between them, but if you look, it's actually in the whites of the eyes. One's kind of more of a Steve Ditko interpretation, the other's more of a John Romita. And no, this isn't some split screen camera trick on my part. I've actually bought this figure twice. The first one had a small paint mistake, which is on screen now, and you probably can't even see it, but it slowly drove me mad just knowing it was. I blame my father for this, I've inherited all of his OCD, but just knowing there's something wrong with it, I had to order another one, and well, you can't have too many Spider-Men, can you? Here's Spidey next to his alter ego Peter Parker from the same wave. The figure is supposed to come with some glasses, but they looked awful, I took them off, resculpted the hair, you can't notice, it's all good. They scale well next to one another. There's a slight bit of a difference between them, but that's mainly because the Peter Parker figure is just a reuse of the Stan Lee figure with a different head and different hands. And different shoes. Didn't notice that. And to answer the big question you're probably all thinking, or not, you've probably all got lives, yes, you can swap the heads over. They don't quite fit perfectly with each other, one's a bit loose than the other. I don't know why the balls look the same, but you can have an unmasked Spider-Man. As well as a Peter Parker running around with a Spider-Man mask on, which he has on a few times in the comics actually, but unfortunately the hands don't swap over, so I still like it. Here's Spider-Man next to what could probably be described as the most basic of Marvel Legends male figures, the Iceman from the Vintage Wave. I can't lie, I actually bought this figure just to go with Spider-Man, and the reason for that is quite simple. I am a massive fan of the old Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends TV show. I really loved it. I think it might actually have been my first sort of introduction to the wider Marvel universe. It was goofy 1970s/80s Saturday morning cartoon fare, but it added a lot to it. I mean, it had all the Marvel characters you probably wouldn't have expected at the time. It had multiple versions of the X-Men, and it had Firestar. I'm sorry, I love Firestar, one of my favourite female Marvel characters, and I'm kind of hoping, Hasbro, give us a 3-pack. You got the Spider-Man, you got the Iceman. It's pretty easy to make a Firestar, just do it, please. Here's Spidey next to a slightly larger male book. This is Electro from the same wave. They look good, I'm not sure if Electro should be so muscular. Normally he looks quite skinny, a bit lanky, but it works. Yet again, the figures look good together. It's something you can put him next to on your shelves and he doesn't look out of place. Here's Spidey next to a female figure, in this case the White Rabbit. Yet again, it's a Spider-Man villain I kind of have a soft spot for. She's a little silly, a little goofy, but she's got that classic Marvel touch I really like. I mean, if she was sort of more modern, she would have been introduced as a TikToker or YouTuber, a Belle Delphine type person. Yes, I know who Belle Delphine is. Don't judge me. Here's Spidey next to your average build figure. The main man himself, Man-Thing. I think he scales well to him. I do have a bit of a soft spot for the relationship between Man-Thing and Spider-Man, as much as a relationship can be called. It's more the fact that Spider-Man keeps running into him in multiple universes at multiple times, and it's always a bit funny and a bit quaint. Okay, here's one I had to do, and it works. It's Spider-Man next to Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin from the Vintage Wave. They both have this great classic sort of colour scheme going, and it's beautiful. If you're only going to pick up 2 figures from the Spider-Man Vintage Wave, just get Spider-Man and Norman Osborn. And if you're going to get a third, get Gwen Stacy, because, you need to for the 3 of them together. So, okay, what's my final thoughts on this figure? I recommend it. I actually recommend the entire wave, really, except for the Daredevil figure, but that was more the fact that it wasn't really my cup of tea. Go out, pick these up. I think you can get them at most online retailers. As I say, I got mine from Comics and Cocktails, which had a really great price on them, and I've also ordered the standalone figures of Mysterio and the Kingpin, which are coming out later in the year. Well, that's it. As I said, I recommend this figure a lot. So, until next time, folks, stay safe, stay sane, and keep on rolling. And I'll see you all next time. Bye! Oh, by the way, my next figure review is probably going to be my second favourite comic book character of all time.